Good morning, friends. Welcome to Take Two for this Wednesday, the 23rd of January, 2019. It's hump day. I hope you're having a great midweek. And also, if you are local and you would like to get in on a really super great Bible study that my husband and I are facilitating at Dothan Vineyard Church, it starts at 6 o'clock and it is great. It's about boundaries. So if you get an opportunity, stop on over and see us this evening. It's going on for several more weeks. Anyway, that all being said, I want to share a little bit with you today about betrayal. Now, years ago, Michael and I had moved to a new place, and this place that we were in, we hardly knew anybody at all, just a few people. And we were going to be staying there for a little while in this new place. You know, in missions, you travel and you do various things, but we were settling down there, and one of the things I used to do, I used to visit the grandmother of a family, an elderly woman, nice sweet little old lady, and I used to go visit her like on a weekly basis. And when I would go over and see her, usually the housekeeper was there doing housework all around me, you know, shining the cabinets and the mirrors and cooking meals and that kind of thing. And we would sit there and we would visit for a little while, me and the little grandma. And sometimes the housekeeper would make grandma a cup of tea and say, while I'm making tea, would you like one too? Sure. So I kind of, sort of, in a fringe kind of way, got to know the housekeeper. Her name was Ruthie. And I remember one time we were there and we were having a cup of tea and I was visiting with the elderly woman, and Ruthie got a phone call and said, I must dash out. We have another problem at the school with my foster child. And I thought, oh, how sad is that? So she dashed out and I finished visiting with the elderly woman until the family got home from work. And I said, you know, I said, what's Ruth? Oh, she's got a foster daughter who's just been so much trouble, a little girl, and so on. So I kind of thought, oh, that's sad. But, you know, I said, I'll just say a prayer for her. And I didn't think much of it, you know, other than it was kind of a sad thing. Well, anyway, a few weeks went on and I would visit and I would see her. And before you know it, Ruthie and I started visiting. I remember one time Grandma kind of dozed off and I didn't want to just leave because, you know, I felt bad. So I started kind of visiting a little bit with Ruthie, not interfering with her housework or anything. But she said, you know, sometimes it's just so nice to have somebody to talk to. She said, you know, I'm off every Thursday. Do you think that maybe we can have a cup of coffee? And I said, sure, that would be great. So, a little time later, Ruthie and I sat and met at a coffee shop and we started talking and talking, and she did most of the talking, I did most of the listening. And I could tell what happened was she just sort of needed to vent. She needed to spill her guts. And before you know it, she opened up and spilled all over the table. And so she was on and on and on. And she told me about her marriage, and she told me about her child, and she told me about her birth children and then the foster daughter, and she just talked and talked and talked and talked. She told me personal stuff that, I mean, I was quite surprised she told me that much. But again, if she had not had somebody to talk to, you know, for a long time, I could understand where it was maybe bottling up. It was kind of like, you know, a pot ready to boil over. So I just listened and listened. Well, after about 2 hours of listening and just interjecting a few, oh yeah, oh wow, you know, kind of things, I thought, well, you know what, maybe I've gotten to a point in this conversation where I could share this much personal information. So I did. I shared a little bit, and primarily what I shared was that, you know, sometimes, and I kind of did it generically, sometimes when you move to a new place, sometimes you don't feel welcome, you know, that kind of thing. And so I was grateful that, you know, two acquaintances could well be on their way to a friendship, and I thought it was kind of nice. So I didn't think much about it. We embraced, and that was it. Well, you know, by the time the visit ended, she had shared about this much with me, and I had shared about this much with her. I mean, basically, that's what it was. She spilled her guts, and I just shared a tiny little bit. Well, a few days later, I was somewhere, and it was actually the family of the elderly woman that I came into contact with, and she said something kind of just out of the side of her mouth, and what it was a reference, a very clear-cut reference to the little bit that I had privately shared with Ruthie. And I thought, what? With all of the stuff that Ruthie had shared with me, boatloads, that I could probably go out and hang her with the information I knew. But of course I kept it personal and private because I was trying to respect her privacy and understand her heart, that she, wasn't the only one going through challenges. So I shared my little bit with her. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? And I thought, and it was clearly a direct reference, practically verbatim, word for word, of what I'd said to her. She casually took my information and just shared it with somebody else with no regard to my privacy and my feelings. And I'll tell you what ended up happening. I felt betrayed. Now, has that ever happened to you, where you share something private with somebody, someone you hope you could trust, someone that maybe you've known for years, someone that, never in a million years would you think would ever do a thing like that to you, and then they go and do a thing like that? Think about couples, who've been together for years and years and years, and then you find out that one of them was cheating, or maybe an employee you've had for years and years, and you find out that forever they've been cheating the company. That's terrible when you have betrayal. Now, of course, me just sharing a little bit like this with Ruthie and her offhandedly telling a third person wasn't, the world wasn't going to end. But still, betrayal is betrayal, and it's a very hard thing to get over. So my word to you is, if you ever feel like that's happening, stop and analyze the situation and just become all the wiser for it. The ultimate betrayal obviously was when Judas did what he did to Jesus. After walking with him for all those years and walking and watching miracles happen and camaraderie among the apostles and all that, and suddenly for him to just take a little bag of money and say, I'll go ahead and I'll betray him and have him arrested. And then, of course, the guilt was so much from the betrayal that Judas even went out and committed suicide over it. I hope and pray, boys and girls, that you, will never betray a good friend or a family member or a loved one, number one. And number two, if you've been betrayed, find it in your heart to forgive them, meet them where they are, understand why they may have done that, where it's coming from, and move on. Because let me tell you something, I carried that betrayal, that tiny little betrayal, I carried that for a long time. I still was blown away at the fact that she would do a thing like that, and I thought, why would anybody do that? But then I had to remember she herself had been going through an extremely troubling time in her life. Now, I'm not making excuses for Ruthie's behavior. Please understand, when people act badly and they do bad things to you, you can forgive them without saying what they did was okay. What she did was wrong, but I had to understand where she was coming from. So like Jesus on that cross, who was praying for the men nailing him to the cross and saying, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. They knew just what they were doing, but what he was in fact saying was, forgive them, because they're just being so foolish in what they're doing. They'll come around, they'll realize it. And of course, the centurion, who was the leader of all those soldiers, did end up kneeling at the cross and said, surely this was the Son of God. So people will come around and realize sometimes what they've done to you is betrayal. And let me tell you, there's a good ending to this, because I carried around that betrayal feeling for months. And then one day I bumped into Ruthie in a public place. months and months later, and she said to me, she said, you know, I always had a tendency to be a bit of a gossip. And I'm like, oh, do tell. And she said, and some of the things that you talked about with me that day and we talked about together, she said, I hope you didn't gossip about me. And I said, Ruthie, I don't do that. I never would do that. And she says, well, I admit I gossiped a little bit about you. And I said, uh-huh. And of course I didn't say that I knew that. And she said, so I'm asking that you forgive me. And you know what? I did, but I already had anyway. And I thought, well, that's good. That's good. I had a little bit of closure there. But it doesn't always have a happy ending like that. Sometimes you have to deal with people who've died, or you have to deal with people, other ones who have betrayed you that you're never going to see again. It all comes down to you. And it's like my sister says to me all the time. She says, look, Jeannie, you could be bitter or you could be better. You know the difference between bitter and better? It's I. Hey, go be a blessing to somebody today, okay? You might end up being the only one who is. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jeanne Sigler, Jeanne Sigler. Hit the subscribe button. And, of course, as always, listen to some great music on WRMZ.org and hit the listen button. Okay, everybody, enjoy your hump day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.